Hello everyone, so in this video, let's talk about the DJI Goggles 3 and a simple guide on how to use it and some things that we could discuss about this DJI Goggles 3. As you all know, I have already made a video about this and how we compare it with the Goggles 2. But this time, let's do a different approach. In the first part of this video, let's talk about the way it was designed by DJI. And from there, let's go and let's discuss the menu system so that you will be informed on how to use those systems on your video, especially when you're using your Avata 2. Okay, let's go. Let's start with how it was designed. Similarly to the Integra, they have integrated the battery and the goggles. Here, you have your battery inside this, and on the right side of the strap is the wire. So if ever you will be putting it on your bag, be very careful on this right part because this has the wire. As we all know, when it was disassembled by Madstech, if you want to see the disassembly, you could watch Madstech video, and he really disassembled all of this, especially the Avata 2. But I will not try to do it because it's quite difficult to do so. So from here, you have two antennas. This is not just for the pressure point on your forehead, but it also acts as a way to put an antenna. From there, you can see two cameras that is being used for a pass-through camera. So if ever you are flying alone, you can see your front, but of course this is a bit tight. I think it is around equivalent to a 35mm full-frame lens. So it's quite tight if you'll be using this while you are flying. Then you have another antenna on the front that is crossed. So probably those are the antenna for the HD system of DJI. And of course, you got these two foldable antenna here. Basically, this is the DJI Goggles 3 in a nutshell. So let's look at the menu system. I'll try to discuss it, how it could be used, so you'll be informed if ever you will be having your DJI Goggles 3. So for this video, I turned on the Goggles 3. I also opened up the Avata 2 so I can show you the menu system while it is turned on, because if you'll just turn on the Goggles 3, some of the menu will not be able to press. So if you press up, you will see the camera settings on the bottom of the screen. Since we are recording, we're not able to record it, but I'll go over to how you would adjust it normally if you'll be using it flying. So most of the time I'm in auto mode, but you could adjust it to manual mode before you start your recording. Some people do put it in manual mode because they want to control the shutter speed. So most of FPV pilots do use the double your shutter speed. So if you're using 60 frames per second, the shutter speed should be around 1/120 or close to that number. But most of the time, I'm in auto mode, so I do not adjust it that much. Unless I try to have that motion blur on my video. EV, I usually do not touch it if you're in manual mode. But if you don't have an ND filter and you want to lower down your exposure, you could lower down this value. Or if you want to brighten up your video, you could increase it a bit, but you will introduce grain and noise on your video. White balance I usually use even on my cameras, even on the Pocket 3. If I'll be using a manual white balance, I usually put it at 5500 Kelvin, but it's up to you on how to adjust it, whichever suits you best. Of course, if you try to lower down this value, if I'm not mistaken, you could make it cooler, so bluer, that is cooler, of course. And if you want to make it warmer, you have to increase the value. But most of the time, I'm just at around 2500 Kelvin. And for the aspect ratio, if you will go 2.7K and 4K resolution, you can have the 4:3 aspect ratio. But if you are in 1080p, I usually use 16:9. What the good thing about 4:3 aspect ratio is your field of view would be wider because you're using the whole sensor. Because with 16:9, you crop a bit the bottom part of your sensor. So that is the aspect ratio. Video quality, you could choose 4K, I think up to 120 FPS if I'm not mistaken. Usually just use 4K 60, and if I want to increase the smoothness of the video, I usually use either 1080p 100 fps or 120 fps or 2.7K, okay, 120 fps. Now for the FOV, I usually use wide, but ultra wide is very much welcomed. But with ultra wide, it gives you an illusion that you are moving very quickly because of the very wide field of view. So if you compare it with the wide, for example, the speed is just 20 kph. Then if you go with ultra wide, you will perceive it at around 30 kph, something like that. So most of the time I just use wide FOV. Auto ISO limit, sometimes I just put this in auto, but of course the lower down the value, the better your video quality would be. So if you could go lower around 100, the better. But of course, if you can't, just put it in auto. EIS, this is the stabilization. I use Rocksteady. If you want to put it in gyro flow, disable the EIS so that the drone will record your gyro data. Color is, I just use normal, but I believe you can choose vivid if I'm not mistaken. But normal would be okay, so that there is still room for adjustment during color grading. Okay, so if you press at the bottom, you will see this top bar record. This is when you want to do a manual recording, just press that button. You could have an enhanced display if you just want to brighten up your screen. This is the way to go, but I usually use it on normal mode. Head tracking, if you're using motion controller, you could enable head tracking, so wherever you face your goggles, the camera will look at that direction. Share live view, if you want to share your recording or your flight footage directly to a mobile device via Wi-Fi, you need to press this option. But of course, if you will be using it via Wi-Fi, there would be some delay on your video. Next would be Easy Acro. You use this if you would be using the Motion Controller 3. Easy Acro, as the name suggests, is a way to flip and to do a 180-degree movement on your Avata 2 without much problem. And of course, lastly is the goggles defog. I usually turn this on if the environment that I'm flying at is very humid or very hot, so that the goggles 3 will not overheat. And of course, I forgot, brightness. You could adjust it if it's too dark for your liking. Then, we go for the menu system. Okay, let's go with status. If you want to change your gear from Avata to Air 3 or even the Mini 4 Pro, you can choose it in this option. Very easy to explain. If ever you got an Air 3, you just need to press this and it will disconnect from the Avata 2, connect with with the Air 3, okay? Next would be album. If you connect your Avata 2 with your goggles 3, you'll be able to see the video footages as well here. Transmission. All of this is usually in auto mode, okay, but I will discuss this broadcasting. If you want to broadcast your footage to other Goggles 3 user, just turn this option on and you can share your live feed. Focus mode, if I'm not mistaken, when you turn this on or auto, sides of the screen becomes very blurry, but the middle part is very much in focus. Now for channel mode, this is, you have auto or manual. It just gives you the frequency that you want to use, but I usually just press auto and I let the Goggles 3 decide for. Settings, of course, there are a couple of menus here. For safety, here is where you adjust your flight altitude, the max flight altitude, and your max flight distance. I usually just have a max flight altitude of 120 meters because I do not fly beyond 100 meters. It's quite problematic if the quad suddenly, because we are pushing it too much, and suddenly the motor stops from working while in mid-air, and 120 meters is a very huge drop. So although I do not usually fly at that height, I just put it here just in case. Especially if you're doing mountain dives, just try to check your altitude. If you need to adjust it, but I believe you could go higher, up to 500 meters. Because if you're in the mountain, top of the mountain, you have to make sure that you are flying above that mountain because you don't want to have a return to home with 120 meters while your current location is around 400 meters. You will lose the quad once you do a return to home. Max flight distance, I usually put it no limit because I usually do long flights. So our maximum at the moment is 3.1 kilometers. So I was hoping to get at least 4 kilometers just for the fun of it. Return home altitude, adjust this depending on the height of the highest thing that is near you. So if you are in a building, of course you have to put this higher. But if you're the area that you are in, you just have a small trees that are around 10 to 20 meters, and the 50 meters would be enough. As we return to home, I'll update home point. If you want to adjust your home point, or if you are moving, you just press this in case you want to adjust your home point to your latest location. So you will be doing this if you are, for example, you are on a car and you are moving. Your previous home point would be very, very far from you. So you just press this so that you could update your home point. This part is calibration. We don't usually touch this unless we have to do so. Here, ESC beeping. You press if you want to turn on the motor, and if you want to locate your quad, just press that and it will beep. Another thing is advanced. The Avata to do if in case it lost the signal. So if you are outside, you press return to home. But if, for example, you're just flying on a house or inside a building, so you just either choose hover or land. Because if you choose return to home and you lost your signal, the quad will go to the highest altitude that you set that in. So if, for example, you set it at 50 meters, it would really go 50 meters. So it will hit your ceiling or whatever things that you have there. So try to adjust this if ever you will be flying your quad indoors. Okay. Emergency propeller stop. I don't usually use this, but there is that settings if you need to. Control. For the gimbal pitch speed, I just press normal. Calibration, if you want to calibrate. Units, I use metric, of course. And here, turtle mode. With turtle mode, if your Avata 2 is flipped, when you press this turtle mode, it will try to be upright. Okay. Camera. This is similar to what we had in the previous discussion, but here you could set your grid lines. I usually use the grid, but if you're not keen on using it, just turn this off. It will just give you a guideline on how you would want to frame your shot. Center point, I turn this on. Very, very helpful, especially if you want to hit very, very tight gaps. Very, very easy to do so. Storage, if you want to see how much is the available space for your storage for your SD card. Then advanced camera settings. Here, usually record with both, and camera view recording. All of these are all turned on. Color is normal. Everything is in stock 00 auto. Okay. Display. The brightness is 4. Scaling is 100%. Home point, I put it as on so I could see an H every time I fly, so I would know where to go back in case I need to go back. Goggles defog, you could have it here. You could also press it here. It is similar to the previous one that I showed you. Enable real view PIP. If you press your left and right side of the goggles 3, okay. If you press the left side and right side of your goggles 3, you would enable your camera and see the view. Okay. You could have it in 2D and 3D. When I'm using it in 3D mode, I get dizzy, so I don't usually use it. I just use it as 2D mode. What else? About. So this is the about section. If you want to see your battery cycle count, you can see it here. So that is the menu system of the DJI Goggles 3, and hopefully this could help you to navigate your Goggles 3 and give you some insights when you are flying your Avata 2, or even the O4 Air unit once it's out. So, see you in the next video. Happy flying and enjoy using your Avata 2 and Goggles 3.